Hey, 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 welcome back to She Sells, He Sells podcast, where we are here to change the way you think about sales by getting you to look at it in a whole new way. Krista here for a solo episode, and I'm going to call it a little sales snack. Do we like that name, sales snack? I'm playing around with it, and you'll actually hear more about why in today's episode. So the goal of this episode is to be power packed with really my number one hack for getting shit done. This idea for this episode, it came about from a follower of mine, and I had like a question box up in one of my Instagram stories, and she said, how do you know when it's time to stop learning and start doing? And I love the question because my answer is really simple. It was time to start doing yesterday. But if you didn't do yesterday, then today is your second best option. I understand the feeling of wanting to learn all the things and do all the things and grow in so many ways. I totally get that. However, we can find ourselves in this constant fire hose of learning where we are just gulping down new information all the time, and that becomes really overwhelming. One thing that I have as a hallmark of me as a person, but also of our Acorn brand, is that I teach you the things and then I teach you how to do the things. And I encourage you to do the things as I'm teaching you the thing. Knowledge without action is just wasted time, in my humble opinion. But when you think about it, anything great that you've ever created in your life has taken movement. It's taken action. And so I want to encourage you to go do the thing. Now, when we look at the tasks that we do as business owners or people, I'm going to speak from my own lens, which is as an entrepreneur. We have things that absolutely must get done. And then we have things that we should do. We quote, should do. The things that we must get done are things like meeting with clients, right? So if you are client facing, maybe you're coaching one-on-one or you're coaching in a group, or you're a consultant that's strategizing with clients, you have to show up to that, right? If you don't, you lose the contract, you lose your money. If you are working in a brick and mortar store, you have to show up to the store. That's a part of your job description. If you're working on deadlines where you're creating projects for people, you have to show up to get the project done. It's a non-negotiable. How you manage those tasks is a whole different conversation than what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm talking about today is the things that you should do. And I'm air quoting. I know if you're listening to this, you can't see this, but we all have ideas. We all have things, projects, or maybe areas in which we want to grow in business, but they take a back seat to the things that have to get done logically, as they should. But how do you find the time and the space and the motivation to get the things that you want to get done alongside the things that have to get done? And therein lies the problem. So that is what I find with most entrepreneurs. They come to me wanting to know how to sell and wanting to grow in their sales storytelling and in their messaging and get their message out in all different ways. But they already have a lot going on, right? They have the clients they're seeing. They have the classes that they're teaching that they need to show up on. They have the deliverables. They have all of those things. And it feels like the time that they don't, the other time they have is so limited. And then when they do sit down to do that work, they just don't even know where to begin. So a lot of times they begin trying to learn and grow more in that way. So I'm going to walk you through my hack for accomplishing more in a little bit of time with these like things that we want to do, but we don't necessarily have to do. And I'm going to use the podcast and our goal to double our downloads this year as an example. So when I find that people are struggling with time management, it's usually one of three things that's going on. Number one, they don't have a system. So they don't have any time management system. Number two, They don't have boundaries to respect the system. And or number 3, they don't know what to do when they do have the time. So it's kind of a tiered approach. First, you need the system. Then you need the boundaries. Then you need the map of what you're going to do. And that part gets the most confusing. And that's what I'm going to walk you through. So let's talk through the first 2 parts before we get to that. Number 1, you don't have a system. Time blocking is not my forte. I am not a time blocking coach. I am a sales and messaging and storytelling coach that actually is going to help you build a lot of confidence and clarity in yourself as you're doing it. However, I know enough to be a little dangerous because I've had to figure it out in 14 years of entrepreneurship. My biggest tip for any of this is setting appointments with yourself. So just like you have a calendar that has the time you're meeting your clients on there and the time you have to show up for the class and the date the deliverable is due, you need to block in time for these other projects. You need to block in hours for the thing that you want to be growing in. So let's say you want to really brush up on your Instagram marketing. That means you're going to look at your week and you're going to think, all right, I want to post 3 times a week. Right now, I'm kind of rusty when it comes to creating a post. It takes me about an hour to create it and post it. So that means you need to find 3 hours on your calendar to create that. If you want to batch content, maybe you look for 12 hours early in the month that you can put on the calendar to create the content and then schedule it to be posted, whatever it looks like for you. But you have to put the time on your calendar. You can't expect to be on a client call while you're scrolling Instagram looking for inspiration, right? Just like you can't expect a deadline that's coming up for Friday for something you owe to someone. You can't expect that you're going to have time during that time to work on your Instagram game unless you schedule it. Just like if you have a brick and mortar store that you go into to actually sell to people, you are not going to necessarily have the time to work on the Instagram presence unless you block it, unless you have someone else covering for you for an hour and you take the time to do that. So it's as simple as making calendar appointments with yourself and being really honest about what's important and what you need. The second piece of that is the boundaries. So this is where that first part falls apart. I just was talking to a client about this. She has the time blocked on her calendar, but then she has somebody that's on the phone and they just keep talking and they won't stop. Or she's working on a client-facing project, but then the phone rings and it feels important, so she's just going to pick up the phone and handle it in the moment. Or you're doing your market research on Instagram and then your kid comes in and says, "Mom, will you watch a movie with me?" And you put it down and you go do that. There's time for all of it, but you have to respect the boundaries you created. You have to do the thing that you said you would do when you were feeling really motivated to do it. I'm going to say that again because I think that's important. You have to do the thing that you said you would do when you were feeling really motivated and said you would do it. That's self-trust. That's self-belief. That's self-confidence. And so if you've committed to something that you want to do, trust yourself that you're going to do it. Create belief in yourself by giving yourself a plan and creating those boundaries. So that can look like getting on a phone call and saying, okay, we have 30 minutes. So at 11:30, I need to be off the phone. So let's make sure we spend these 30 minutes the best way that we possibly can, make them the most productive we can. Being really upfront. Put your phone on do not disturb when you're in these blocks of time. You don't have time for distractions. When your kid says, "Hey mom, I want to watch a movie," and say, "Well, hey, I'm actually in the middle of work, but I am done. My doors are closed. Business doors are closed at 5 p.m. So why don't we do it at 6 right after dinner?" Really respect your boundaries. By respecting your boundaries, you're respecting your work, you're respecting yourself. But then here's where this tricky part comes in, because you have the time, right? So you created the time, you have the boundaries, but I have so many people come to me and say, "I just don't know what to do." Like, I know I want to grow on Instagram, but I don't know how to do it. Or I know I want to create a new offer, but when I sit down to do it, I'm so overwhelmed with what to do. Or I know I want to grow my revenue by an extra 50K this year, but I don't know how to do it. And I'm going to walk you through what I like to call a productivity map. Now, if you're listening to this on audio, you either want to switch over to YouTube to see the video, or you want to just be really patient with yourself as you visualize. And I'm going to do my very best to describe what I'm showing, but I'm actually going to be showing this on a piece of paper. If you're on YouTube, hopefully this works as well as I think it will. I'm using a Sharpie because I need you to be able to see through my paper, because otherwise it would be mirror image, and I didn't quite figure out how to do this before I got started. So we're going to do our best, but you're going to get the picture. The key to start this is you need to think of one specific thing. It's got to be specific. So if it's a revenue goal, specify the revenue goal. What's the number you're going for? If it is a list growth goal, maybe you want to grow your list by 1,000 over the year, right? Make sure that's specific. If it is social media, instead of saying, I want to get better at social media, that is not specific enough. You want to say, I want to grow by 500 followers, or I want to post 3 times a week for the next 12 weeks. Be really specific. You can tie it to outcomes like the follower growth, the list growth, the revenue growth, or you can tie it to an action, to the thing. My preference is to tie it to an outcome, because we're not going to get so precious with our outcomes that we're scared of saying a goal and, oh my gosh, I'm scared. What if I don't hit it? We're going to really quantify the outcome, and then everything that comes from there is going to be the actions to get there. Okay. So I'm going to use the podcast as an example. Now, if you listened to our first episode of 2025, Brian and I created a bold goal, which was to double the amount of podcast downloads that we have. We have been podcasting since April 2022. It is now January 2025. So we want to take everything that we've done from April 2022 to December 2024, take that number, and we want to double it by the end of this year. Kind of insane, yes, but it's time. It is time for this she sells, he sells wagon to just start really rolling. And it's been like trotting. The horses have been trotting, pulling it along. We need them to like hit the ground and just gallop off into the sunset. So I don't know, the analogy felt right in the moment, kind of random, but we are really focused on growing the downloads of the podcast, because when there's more downloads, that means there's more people listening. We feel so confident about the quality of content we bring to you here, and we just want more people to hear it. And it also takes a lot of time to do a podcast, and so we want it to be worth our while to get new listeners in here. So what did I do? I took a blank sheet of paper, and in the middle, make sure my mic doesn't move too much. In the middle, I wrote my goal, which is double podcast downloads. And I actually can say, I'll actually write my date. So by 12/31/25. Feels like so long from now, doesn't it? It'll be here before we know it. Okay, double podcast downloads. So you decide what your specific, tangible goal is. What is the thing that you want to work on? And don't be scared to quantify it. Give it a number. Give it something that you can know that you have hit or you haven't, because we're not going to beat ourselves up if we haven't. We are going to, I don't want to say beat ourselves up, but we are going to be harder on ourselves if we didn't do anything to try to get there. But if we do everything and we don't get there, that's okay, because we've grown in other ways, right? So you have your goal. Then you want to think of, flipping my paper. You want to think of some big buckets, I guess, for lack of a better word, or some big areas that things need to happen in order for that goal to happen. So for me, when it comes to the podcast, we need more visibility, right? I need visibility. That means I need to be out there talking about the podcast more. I need other people to be doing that. I need to be, and we'll get more specific on all that, but I need visibility. So that's one thing I need. I need a little bit better systems and strategy. And I'll talk about what that could look like. But I need some systems and strategy. We have a lot, but we need a little bit more. I need... I thought of a lot of these before I started, but I didn't quite Didn't quite remember all of them. So we need some visibility, we need some systems, and we need some strategy. We need to focus a little bit more on guests and guesting. And then we also, and there's no right or wrong answer here. So you really want to think, what are some other things that we can do? And we can also focus on collaborations. Let's just say that. Now I can probably come up with some other big buckets, but for right now, this is where I'm going to start. So what I've done on my paper is I've put those big 4 categories in circles around the central circle. This is, if you ever did a mind map when you were a kid in like reading or English class, this is what we're creating. Okay. So I have those things here. Now, I'm going to focus on one of those categories, and I'm going to get really granular about the things that need to happen. Well, I'm get a little bit more granular, I should say, about the things that need to happen in that category. So let's look at visibility. Okay, let's look at visibility. So for doubling the podcast downloads, I need to be more visible. What does being more visible look like? Well, for me, in my own business, that can look like guest speaking. That gets me more visible, right? That can look like more keynoting. That can look like pushing followers. So that means getting more people to follow the podcast. That makes me more visible. That can look like guesting. Even though I kind of have that in another category, I'll still put that here, that I can guest on other people's podcast. That could look like maybe even running ads to the podcast. It can look like a lot of different things. So I'm going to show you what this looks like here in a second, but I have taken that big circle and I've made a bunch of little circles around it. So I've gotten a little bit more granular on visibility. What does visibility mean? Here are some ideas. Now, I'm going to pick one of these things and I'm going to go deeper in it. So let's say pushing followers. So let's say for visibility, I want our podcast to be more visible to other people. And I want to do that by really trying to grow the amount of people that follow our show. So what can I do really specifically to get people to follow our show? Well, I can do like a giveaway for followers. So I can do a giveaway for followers. I can do a new intro and outro on the show to get people to follow. I can ask guests to ask others to follow. I can do that. I can write a blurb in every weekly newsletter that I do to get people to follow. So I'm getting more granular, and this is where it's going to become harder to see, but you can just get the picture of what I'm doing. I'm pulling from that middle and I'm getting as granular as possible. Now, can I even get more specific on one of these? Let's look at the giveaway. Okay, I'll do a giveaway for following. So what do I need to do to make that giveaway happen? Well, I need to find a date. I need to find a prize. I need to have social assets to announce. I need to have email assets to announce. And that's probably it, right? I need a date, I need a prize, I need social email, and I need like a system to track who's following. How am I going to do that? I need to figure that out. So now I'm getting really even more specific about it. And from there, I can say, okay, my date, let me pull out my calendar and look. So that's kind of where it starts, right? If I was building this map right now, I am, but I'm using it as an example. But if I was going to continue and going, I'd probably stop for the pushing followers and I'd probably move on to guesting. What are the tasks that I need to do to get on other people's podcasts. So that might look like pitching. That might look like making a list of other podcasts I know. Well, actually pitching, the list would come from pitching. That might look like talking about it more on this podcast and talking about, hey, I'm open to coming in. That might look like talking about it on my Instagram stories, putting it in my email newsletter. Like there's a million little things that I can do. So the goal is to go as far out as you can with ideas of tasks so that the only thing that's missing is actually doing the task. So when I go back again to that giveaway example, I need to find a date. The next thing for me to do is actually find the date. So I'm going to stop before I actually do the thing. And I'm going to work through this entire map. So I'm going to all these little sub circles from here. I'm going to granulate those tasks, make them more specific. I'm going to come up with some bigger buckets for system and strategy, go really specific. Same for, shouldn't say guesting anymore since I just kind of added that in, but for guests, collaborations, and I'm going to get as specific as I can up until the point that I would actually do the task. And then I'm going to keep this map on my desk. So here's what's going to happen. Back to that 3-step system. I know growing the podcast, doubling the downloads is a part of my 2025 goal. So I find an hour every single week to mark that in my schedule, like podcast growth. Now, if I just had podcast growth in there and I created the boundaries around, okay, I know when that's on my calendar, I don't mess with it. I still could find myself sitting down at my desk and being like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. How am I going to grow this podcast? Oh my gosh, maybe I should go start researching other people's podcasts. And then I'd end up in the black hole of scroll and end up being in the spiral of shame because everybody else has a podcast that's better than mine, yada, yada, yada. But no, you have your map now. So I have my time on my calendar. I am a boundary queen. I have that locked in. And I sit down. I'm like, okay, let me look at these circles. And you're going to work from the out in. So it also allows you to, any outer circle you start on is getting you closer to where you want to be. And that's the beauty of what this is. Any of the outer circles is getting you closer. So I can say, okay, let me look here. I'm going to focus on the date. Let me open up my calendar and pick a date for our follower spree where we're going to push, the follower giveaway. All right, let's say we're going to do that March 1st through March 3rd. Cross it off. Okay, I did that. I got the date. I put it on my calendar. Now, the prize. What could the prize be? Maybe we'll do a $5 Starbucks card for every single person that shows that they followed us during that time frame. If they've already been following us, that counts, or if they start to follow us, that counts. Okay, I wrote that down. I got that done. And then maybe I'm like, ugh, kind of tired of thinking this giveaway. I need a little freedom from that. What else can I do? You know what? Also from this circle, I see that I can create a blurb in my newsletter. I thought of that. Okay, let me write what that blurb would look like and let me put that in my notes or maybe in my, maybe I start my next email and I have that done. Okay, I did that. I can cross that off. So what I love about this project as well, or this productivity mapping, this way of handling this project, it allows for flexibility and creativity. I don't know if you're like me. I find many entrepreneurs are a little free flowing. It didn't used to be this way, but I think entrepreneurship has really brought this out in me. I used to be very much like, no, do 1, do 2, do 3. It doesn't matter if you don't like it, do it. But I found in order for me to be excited about my work, first of all, I need to be excited about my work for any of it to go well. So in order for me to feel excited about my work, I need to build in some flexibility. I need to build in time for creativity. And when I sit down and it's like, I know I have to do these 3 tasks and there's one that I am just not feeling, it's not going to go well. But when I have this map, I have so many options. As long as I've pulled from the outside, I can get closer to the center to where I want to go. And so as long as I'm starting from the outside, it gives me flexibility to get to that thing. Now, let's say I cross everything off on my map on this entire thing that I draw out. Let's say I cross the entire thing out and it's only March 1st. Guess what? I go back to making another map. Okay, well, obviously we didn't double the podcast downloads. It's still only March. What else could I do? Are there any of these things I might repeat? Will I try something new? I really like the system of the 4 things from the middle. So we have our big circle, then we have 4, and then we have 4. So it's 1, 4, 4, and then from each of those 4, it's as many things as you can fit or as many things as you need. It's a game changer. I started doing this with clients in the very beginning of Acorn. I do it a lot in our Acorn intensives when people have a project and they want to accomplish it and they feel so overwhelmed, because it just breaks it down, but it still allows for that flexibility. So I hope you try it. If you listen to this all the way through and you want a quick visual, head over to our She Sells, He Sells YouTube channel. It's linked in the show notes. You can even fast forward to the part where I start talking about this map and you can just take a quick look at it. When you try it, let me know. Shoot me an email, shoot me a DM on Instagram. Tell me that I did it. Send me a picture, tag me in a post, tag me in a story. Let me know. I love seeing this in action. I am so hopeful that it's going to help you hit all those big goals that you have for yourself in 2025, because I think we have these ideas and we get ideas for a reason. We get inspiration for a reason, whether you look at it as God or divine or the universe, or it's just even this beautiful gift inside yourself. An idea is so precious. An idea is so special. A goal, a feeling. We get those things for a reason. Follow them. Do them. See them out. You might end up in a totally different spot than you thought. You might not end up with double podcast downloads, but you might end up with, I don't know, being asked to be on the Mel Robbins podcast, manifesting that. You end up with Mel Robbins on your podcast, also manifesting that. You might end up being picked up by a podcast network, also manifesting that. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope we double our downloads. I'm not sure. I'm going to work towards it. But I also know by doing these things, a lot of other really good stuff is going to happen along the way. So your ideas mean something. Don't let them go. Don't use excuses. Any step forward is a step in the right direction. I'm cheering for you always. I cannot wait to see you put this into action, and we will be back next week with more from Brian and I. If you haven't followed the show, please follow the show. Make sure you're following it on your favorite podcast platform. And please send this episode to at least one person that will benefit from learning how to structure their time in a better way. I talked about this through the lens of entrepreneurship, but it absolutely doesn't have to be that. This can be good for any task that you have. In fact, it's how my daughter and I started tackling her whole college application essay situation. So it's good for everything, not just business and entrepreneurship. I'm always cheering for you. So thankful you're here, and we'll be back next week.